Hello, everyone, and welcome to my lecture on stratification and poverty. Okay, we're going to talk about some pretty interesting things today, so let's get to it. Okay, social stratification, what is it? Stratification is, um, this is from my old textbook, Anderson and Taylor, um, a relatively fixed hierarchical arrangement in society by which groups have different access to resources, power, and perceived social worth. Okay, so yeah, relatively fixed, hierarchical. Okay, resources, when we think about resources, we think about wealth. Okay, when we think about power, we think of the ability to get what you want in spite of opposition from others. Perceived social worth, we're thinking prestige. This becomes very important later when we talk about Max Weber. Okay, um, so here's one example is the caste system in India. You got the Brahmins at the top, the Sudras at the bottom, and even below that, you have the outcasts or the untouchables. Okay, so that are even below that. So it's a hierarchical arrangement, and they all have different access to resources, power, and perceived social worth. Okay, that's how this goes. Now, in the caste system, there's not really the possibility of social mobility. There, for the most part, okay, we could get into, times when mobility could happen, but let's not. Because I want to get to this guy named Karl Marx, okay? One of the most controversial figures in the world, okay? Some people love him, some people hate him. So in the United States, there's often some negative views about Karl Marx. Okay, um, I've got to say Marx is a genius. Okay, doesn't mean you can't disagree with him, but he's a genius. Okay, and I'll get to why later in this lecture. It is perfectly fine to disagree with Marx, and it is perfectly fine to have a negative opinion of Marx. But you have to understand what he's saying before you do. Okay, so many people said Marx was anti-capitalist. Okay, he saw some positive things about capitalism, about how it drives the development of technology, which he thought was good. Okay, he also thought that capitalism was necessary. Okay, and capitalism was also good because it overthrew feudalism. Okay, so that was some good things there. But he recognized that capitalism depended upon the exploitation of workers. Okay, so Marx looks at human history and he sees it as a conflict between social classes. Okay, and these social classes are the bourgeoisie and the proletariats. Okay, the bourgeoisie are the capitalists who own the means of production. Okay, they own the productive property. They own the land, they own the factories, they own the machinery, and they own the materials it takes to make stuff. Okay, so this is opposed to the proletariat, the workers who sell their labor to the bourgeoisie to survive. They own nothing, so they have to sell their labor to the bourgeoisie. Okay, so um, so that's what they have to do to survive. And so these two classes are in conflict. Okay, and so for example, here's how this goes. Don't really have a slide for this, but I'm just going to explain it. Okay, let's say that Megacore here makes shirts for the let's see, it makes shirts for Foothill College. Okay, now what does it take to make a shirt? It takes the materials, land, all that stuff, it takes to that, and it takes labor. Okay. And so when that shirt is sold, it is not, the price of the shirt is not cost of labor plus cost of all the materials, land, machinery, etc., equals the price of the shirt. There is something called surplus value involved too, or profit, that goes to the bourgeoisie. Marx thought that by rights, that surplus value belongs to the workers, to the proletariat, and the bourgeoisie is ripping them off. This is very similar to labor theory of value. Basically, it is labor theory of value, which, like, the way that anything gets value is through labor. Okay, so it's the workers' labor that give value to the shirt. Okay, that's how it becomes valuable. Okay, so when the proletariat, or when the bourgeoisie profit off of that, they are ripping off the proletariat. That's how Marx sees it. Okay, and the consequence for this, and this is going to be part of your in-class exercise here, is alienated labor. Okay, this is from Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, I believe. Yeah, and it was discovered after Marx's death. So if you ever read it, it's really hard to read, but this is what we do. Okay, so alienation, according to Conley, is the process by which human beings become separated from their natural state of being. Okay, this is how, that it's something when we're, we have like a natural state of being, and Marx thought that what capitalism does is separates from it, and we workers, proletariat, experience for different losses. Okay, now the best way to compare this is with unalienated labor. So imagine, first of all, compare, say, somebody who makes, what would they make in a factory? Say, let's say they make jewelry or something, okay, on a factory floor. And let's say they're on an assembly line and their job is to put this clasp in to the necklace, okay? Compare that to somebody who makes necklaces, okay, their whole, as a hobby, okay? What do workers experience, okay, compared to the person who does this as a hobby? First of all, the worker loses the product, okay? The worker who works on an assembly line 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, does not get to keep the product that they make, okay? Unlike somebody who makes necklaces for a hobby, they could keep it, they could sell it, they could give it as a gift, they could say this is trash and trash it and start over. They could do all sorts of things with it. It is theirs. Okay, so the workers do not get to keep the product that they make. Okay. Second is loss of process. Okay, that's just the joy of doing stuff. Okay, losing the joy of being creative. You know, if you're working on an assembly line 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, putting a clasp into, a necklace or something, that's going to become very mind numbing. Okay. This is, compare that to somebody who has like designed the necklace from beginning to end and has had like a good time with it, enjoy the process. Okay. Next is loss of others. Okay. So, if somebody's like making necklaces on their own, um, you know, on their own and selling them, and then I come along and say, "Hey, I make necklaces too, and I'm going to make more money than you," they'd probably say, "Oh, okay." But if I can go, to the uh, to the um, to the boss or something and say, "Hey, you know that this person who's making necklaces or putting clasp on necklaces, they could do like 30 an hour. I could do 40." Then that person's going to feel threatened because I've threatened their job. And this is what happens. You have strained relationships with bosses and competition against other workers. Okay. So rather than being cooperative with one another, we are in competition with one another. So it makes us like, it leads to conflicted relationships and competition. Okay. So finally, you've got loss of self or species being. Okay. Marx thought that this was not natural. Okay. That, that we shouldn't have a job. Okay. We should have many jobs and do many things for work. Okay. This is that selling labor to the bourgeoisie goes against human nature. Marx was thinking. Okay. In the German ideology, Marx thought that unalienated labor says, quote, makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, shepherd, or critic. So I could um, I could like um, teach sociology in the morning, write an article in the afternoon, do teach a drum class, in the evening, and after dinner I could, um, do some other kind of labor I would do. What else would, God, it's hard to tell. What else would I do? Maybe make jewelry or something. And I would never be a sociologist, a drummer, any of that. Okay, there's just labor I do. Okay, but if I was working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week on an assembly line, I'd never make jewelry. Okay, that kind of thing. And think about like all the different kinds of work that you do just to work. What wouldn't you do if if you work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week on an assembly line? Okay. You can see why there was a fight for a 40-hour work week here. So, Marx's solution, okay, is pretty. This is one of the hardest things to understand about Marx. I don't really, I don't think I fully get it either, and a lot of people don't. It's the idea of dialectical materialism. Okay. First, let's start with materialism. Materialism is not the idea that um, somebody's materialistic, like your housemate is materialistic because they buy shoes all the time. Okay, materialism states that our ideas are the result of the physical world. Okay, this is opposed to people like Hegel and Feuerbach and idealists and peace. This is opposed to idealism, which states the physical world is the result of ideas. So let us give an example here. Under idealism, why do we have chairs? Well, people who embrace idealism would say we have chairs because we get ideas to build chairs. So we get this mental picture and stuff of a chair, and we put it all together. We get an idea to build a chair, and then it's there. Okay. Marx says no. We get the idea to build chairs because our legs are sore and we're tired of standing. Okay, it starts with the physical world. It starts with human needs. And that's why in the manifesto, and I'm not sure if this is in the version assigned, that quote, all that is solid melts into air. Okay, that the conditions of the physical world are the basis of ideas. Dialectics says that change occurs when opposites meet. Okay, so you've got a thesis and an antithesis. Okay, and they meet together. There's like two opposite ideas or two opposite things. They get together and form a synthesis, and that becomes the new thesis. And then you've got another antithesis in conflict, creates a synthesis. Okay, so you can see this in the physical world. What happens when ice meets heat? Well, depends on how much heat, water, vapor, etc. But a change occurs. The Then there's the in the realm of ideas. Let's say what happens when the idea of anarchy meets the idea of monarchy, rule by none, rule by one. Could be rule by many, democracy, or rule by majority, something like that. A change occurs when those two ideas meet. They synthesize, and then that synthesis becomes the new thesis. So Marx is looking at the physical world. He's looking at capitalism, and he's looking at some of the contradictions of capitalism that will lead to its demise. Okay, so you've got the separation of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Okay, the bourgeoisie are under oppressive conditions, but they're gathering together, and they actually are cooperating with one another in their work because they have to work together. So when they get together, they are social. Okay, they are social, they are cooperative, they're working together, but the bourgeoisie is in competition. They are competing against one another and trying to put the other one out of business, which happens. And so when the bourgeoisie is put out of business, they become proletariat. And then they go and join the proletariat and share some of the secrets and stuff. And so there becomes to be like, these monopolies, okay, where like very few companies will own most of the market and stuff. So you'll get these monopolies. Well, that becomes very easy to overthrow because there's only one of them, okay? Meanwhile, when you have the proletariat, cooperating in things, they come up with ideas about how to do it. So they're plotting their way to do it, to overthrow the bourgeoisie. Okay, so the commiseration of the proletariat and the overthrow of the bourgeoisie. Okay, that through the dialectic, Marx has figured it out that this is inevitable. Okay, that this must happen. Okay, so this leads to socialism, the state control of the economy, the planned economy. So now, before anybody freaks out about a planned economy, one of my instructors made the point that the bourgeoisie is planning the economy all the time. So it's just like who's planning it. So this is the transition to socialism, state control of the economy. Okay, so after then, we learn to share and, hold hands and sing kumbaya, as I, somewhat joke about. Okay, the state withers away because there's no use for it anymore, and that leads to communism. Okay, so what communism really is anarchy. Okay, those of you who say that there's, communism and anarchy, like some of people get confused by the terms. There is no such thing as a communist state. It could be communist ideologically, but not structurally. Okay, it can be socialist structurally, but not communist structurally. Okay, that's a contradiction in terms. Communism is really anarchy. Marx had some debates back in the day with some of the famous anarchists and about like what the about this is like what the state is. For the anarchists, the state was the enemy. For Marx, it was no, the state is a tool, and it's a tool of the ruling class. And that's why when I talked about critical criminology, I had that quote about from Marx that the ideas of the ruling class are the ruling ideas. And under this situation in socialism, the proletariat is the one with the who now who is the ruling class. So this is the Marx said this term once, this phrase once, the dictatorship of the proletariat. So um, this leads to leading to communism. So whew, okay, a few things to point out here. Let me anticipate some questions. Next time I teach this class, I'm probably going to have more room for discussion about the lectures. But many people will argue that this will not work because the demise of the Soviet Union and the Venezuela, Cuba, like all of these societies have tried it and they failed. But no society did this the way Marx envisioned it. Okay, because all of those countries that did this went from feudalism to socialism. And Marx says that that can't be done. You have to go through this process of capitalism. Okay, you have to go through this process of capitalism for there to be such, for there to be these conditions. For one thing, like it's only under capitalism where you have the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So it's never been tried the way Marx envisioned it. Okay. My own critique of this is that in terms of the problems of capitalism, I think Marx is a genius. I think that in terms of like alienated labor, I think in terms of like the oppression of the proletariat and and that what gives things value is labor, not a market. Okay, so so it's I think he's rather a genius when it comes to the problem. His solutions, he actually talked about them very little. Okay. And he was, somewhat variable on his solutions. He would amend certain things as like society changed and stuff, because part of dialectical materialism is that you never know how these like opposites are going to synthesize. Okay. That's really what some people think, and I agree, is really the core of Marxism is dialectical materialism. Okay, is that kind of like looking at the contradictions within um, uh, the physical world, within the economy, and how that would synthesize, and how that changes. Okay, so um, let's see. I don't see how um, I don't see the proletariat really commiserating. I think that there's like one, um, many of them are kind of bought off. Okay, given like a few little crumbs here, and not really like changing the structure of things. And I don't see, I in the United States in particular, um, a lot of workers, one Facebook meme I saw is that a lot of workers see themselves as temporarily embarrassed billionaires. That someday that they will be, that someday they can be rich. So there's a lack of class consciousness, um, a lack of people embracing their social class. Really, like a lot of workers, they want to become bourgeoisie. That's they want to be the ones in power, accepting the system as it is. I think what's more likely to happen when you have, what's more likely to overthrow capitalism is climate change. I think that environmental changes are, if they are going as predicted, that will cause such a disruption that you will have to have more socialism in order for humans to survive. Um, so that's what I think there. I'm interested in your thoughts. So when you're in class activity, I mean, I'm asking you about alienated labor in that. Feel free to talk about, what you think of this. Okay. And there's a lot I'm leaving out about Marx. But this is the stuff that I think is most important to an intro to sociology class. If you know something about Marx that I'm leaving out, go right ahead and talk about it. I would love to have that conversation. Okay. We can get to Max Weber's idea of social class too. Weber, Weber, is pronounced Weber. A lot of sociologists get annoyed when people call him Weber. Um, offended on his behalf, I guess. He talks about social class in terms, well, this is how Anderson and Taylor, interpret it. The social structural hierarchical position groups hold relative to the economic, social, political, and cultural resources of a society. So there we've got, So it is, in Weber's terms, the extent of a person's life chances or the opportunities that people have, that people in the same social class have in common. Okay. So he's talking about, and this is all based on power. Power, the ability to get what one wants in spite of opposition from others. Okay. So you're of a higher social class when you have more power. Okay. Well, the three different kinds of like areas in which there is of social class. You've got it in the three components. That's what I should say. Wealth is economic power. Okay. Wealth generally is what you own minus what you owe. Objects or symbols owned that have value. Okay. That's wealth. So so I don't know, if you get in trouble, if you get in trouble, maybe you can buy your way out of it or something. Prestige is social power. Okay. It's a cultural component of class. It is, it's basically your social value. And so if you get in trouble, maybe you can charm your way out of it or something like that. I'm thinking things like speeding tickets and stuff, or going to jail or something. Maybe you can buy your way out of trouble. Maybe you can charm your way out of trouble, or maybe you can organize with others and get yourself out of trouble. That's party, okay? Not so much political parties like Republican, Democrat, things like that, but putting social class into political action. Okay, so I've included a video, YouTube video on Weber and social class. I'd like you to look at. The person in that video does a better job than I do. So we'll go through it. So, how many social classes are there? Two, as Marx thought. Sometimes we think of it as three in upper, middle, lower. Sometimes four, upper, middle, working, and lower. But the line that marks like the separation of social classes is a social construction. Okay, there's hierarchy and there's these gradations and things, but we could have the top 1% and the top 0.1% be different social classes if we wanted. Okay, it is a social construction. Okay, but here's something that James Coleman came up with. Okay, and in 1965, and I like it. I like it because it's instructive too. Uh, he talked about two upper classes. Upper is old money and lower upper is new money. Some of you may be familiar with the tension between old money and new money. Okay. Um, if you are new money, you might be referred to by old money people as nouveau riche or nouveau, and it's not a compliment. What it means is that you have the money, but you don't have the class. Let's say you got rich, by, with Google stocks or something. You worked for Google the old days, you got some stock options, and then you got rich and you decided that you were going to move to the Hamptons on Long Island. And let's say that there was this nice old house and you just tore it down to build your dream home. The neighbors might call you nouveau, and it's not a compliment. Okay, it means you've got the money, but not the class. Okay, it kind of reminds me of that movie, The Titanic, where there's this character played by Kathy Bates, I think, who is considered like nouveau. Okay, who's kind of like, doesn't quite fit in with everybody else. Then you've got three middle classes. You've got the upper middle professional class. Those are your doctors, your lawyers, your university professors, your sociologists. These are people who, your engineers. These are people who have a lot of control over their work, who are considered to have who like have theoretical knowledge, okay, who and yeah, and have a lot of control, and usually live by usually they practice by a code of ethics. Okay, they're usually self-regulating that way. The middle class are the white collars and entrepreneurs. Okay, these are your business people, the middle. Okay, those are your business people, and if they're really, really successful, they become new money. Okay, so those are like your business people there. Lower middle, the working class, those are your blue collar laborers. Okay, those are skilled laborers. Those are your auto mechanics, your welders. There's some, and there's they usually have learned some kind of skill, um, but not theoretical knowledge. They have practical knowledge. So they have learned how to work on a Prius, but they have not designed the Prius. Okay, so that's the difference there between the professional and the blue collars there. Okay, then there's two lower classes. The upper lower are the unskilled laborers. Those are your retail workers. Those are your, often your field workers, your dishwashers. Um, you know, these are the jobs that are low pay and just about anybody could do them. Okay. Not anyone, but just about anyone. Okay. There are a lot of people who could step in and do this work. Okay. Um, for example, that's like one of the differences here between lower middle and upper lower is that I could step in and become a dishwasher. I could do that job. I can't step in and be an auto mechanic or a welder. I don't know how to do that. I would have to learn how. I could learn dishwashing, in less than a day. Okay, probably an hour. Okay. And I've done it before, so it hasn't changed that much since I did it. So then the lower, the socially and economically disadvantaged. These are your chronically homeless people, chronically socially and economically disadvantaged. Okay, these are people generally without jobs. Okay, so one reason why I like this is that it brings in prestige, it brings in occupation, it hints at education and things. So a lot of the different components of social class come in here. So a social class, we can think of the indicators are income, wealth, education, and occupation. Okay, those are four indicators of social class that work pretty well. Can you have a PhD and work as an unskilled laborer? Yes. What social class are you? It gets a little tricky. Okay. Um, we can also think of this in terms of, well, how stratified our society is. And this will come when we talk about this, we'll talk about the divide. Okay. Oh, before that, there's a couple more terms. One is social mobility, a person's movement over time from one social class to another, and then meritocracy, a system in which one's status is based on merit or accomplishment. Okay. Here's the deal. And I've like done I cannot do my favorite lesson um, online. My favorite lesson in the world has to be done in the classroom. Um, social mobility. Yeah, let's talk about social mobility a little bit. A person's movement over time from one social class to another. That is, um, well, it's rare. Um, and it doesn't really most people are going to die in the same social class that they are born in. That's called social reproduction. And I'll talk about that later when I talk about things like education. But yes, a person's movement over time from one social class to another is what social mobility is. When there is mobility, it's usually one rung up or one rung down. Meritocracy, a system in which one's status is based on merit or accomplishment, is basically a myth in the United States. I'm sure that you've all heard like we can all succeed if we work hard and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and that this is the land of opportunity and things like that. So now it happens, but it's actually very rare. It's rarer than you think. And in my favorite lesson to do in the classroom is a Monopoly game in which I stratify the players. So the horse is going to be, here's how it works. Okay. Let's look at like income here. Okay. So, so I basically have 5 players in the game. One is the horse that represents, that gets, has the average income of $213,941 because that represents 51.5% of all income made. And the lowest fifth is like 12,000. This is cut off a little bit on the slide. It's $12,943, representing 3.1%. So I stratify the game this way, and the horse always wins. Here's the thing: is that the um, the rewards that people get in from their labor is the starting point of the next generation. Okay, so basically, the people who are at the top were at the top usually because they inherited, okay, or they had some kind of advantage there to keep them at the top. Okay, so are there stories of the rags to riches stories? Yes, and it's put out in the media quite a bit, but it's rare. Okay, and we can think of here in terms of median net worth also. The highest fifth has a median net worth of about $415,000. The lowest fifth about 6,600. When I talk about race, I'm going to talk about wealth, and it's also that's very important there. So watch this video on Weber in class also, and then do the in class activities. Yeah. Um, basically, I want you to understand, like, you know, you know, alienated labor and how modern workers are alienated in their labor. So let's look at what experiences you have had as workers. So, okay, that is all. Thank you. And next time we'll talk about race. Okay, good luck. Bye.